In today's edition of World News, we bring you glimpses from the year gone by in the special program The World in 2021. The narrators are Valsa Williams and Abhishek Mukhopadhyay.
It's time for a new year. 10 seconds and counting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The year 2021 ushered in with it a promise of the world emerging from the shadows of the coronavirus pandemic, which had gripped it in 2020. As vaccines became more readily available, people were hopeful of seeing an end to the pandemic, which had left a trail of death and misery in its wake. The world slowly emerged into a post-COVID world with economic activity picking up, flights between countries resuming, visits between world leaders becoming more imminent, and the mobility in the daily lives of people being restored. The events of the year started with the tumultuous scenes witnessed at the seat of democracy of the world's biggest power, the United States of America. Riots in Capitol Hill saw democracy being challenged at the doors of its most vocal exponent, the U.S. The U.S. was central to most of the important world events in 2021. Most notably, the U.S. troops withdrawing from Afghanistan, ending its longest war, triggered a chain of events which have considerably altered the geopolitics of the region and the world.
On the other side of the world, an increasingly assertive China was staking its claim in the geopolitical, technological, and economic spheres of international affairs. Armed with indigenously developed vaccines, China sought to make an accelerated return to the global supply chain with disruptions in the Western world. The year also demonstrated the weaknesses in the global supply chain network when the Suez Canal was blocked by the ship Ever Given for days together. Strategic concerns over an increasingly assertive China to the freedom and security in the sea lanes of communication also brought together like-minded nations from across the world on the Indo-Pacific region. Political turmoil in Afghanistan was preceded by a series of events in Myanmar which saw the military seizing power by forcefully displacing the civilian rule in the country. The political crisis spawned a humanitarian crisis which saw massive protests and aggressive countermeasures in Myanmar, drawing the attention and concern of the entire world. Conflict also marred Ethiopia as the country's president and the 2019 Nobel Prize winner Abiy Ahmed was embroiled in a bloody battle against the rebels in the Tigray region of the country.
The year also saw fresh impetus to multilateralism. As India entered the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member, it did so with the promise of being a voice for the developing nations. The positive signals that emerged from the U.S. re-entering the global high table reinvigorated multilateralism. This was put to the test when countries of the world converged to negotiate on solutions to the biggest problem facing the world today, climate change. Climate change and its severity was brought starkly into light by the numerous and frequent adverse weather events in 2021. At the COP26, world leaders committed to redeem the pledges they had made 6 years ago at Paris. As the year progressed and an ever-increasing proportion of population got vaccinated against COVID in the developed world, cultural, sporting and entertainment events started to occur around the world. The year saw incredible feats of science with many spacefaring achievements by space agencies around the world. The COVID vaccines were developed in record time, proving how much science can contribute to the benefit of humanity. The biggest sporting extravaganza of the year was the Tokyo Olympics. The Olympics also saw India's best ever performance in history, with a young Neeraj Chopra bringing golden glory to the country. Film enthusiasts rushed to the screens in the salubrious environs of Goa for the International Film Festival of India, IFFI, in its 52nd edition. The resolve of humans tested by the COVID pandemic stood strong as the world emerged from its fear.
On the 6th of January, the seat of the U.S. democracy, the Capitol Hill, came under siege from a huge crowd of rebellious supporters of the outgoing President Donald Trump. The unprecedented scenes of chaos that ensued were described as the insurrection at Capitol Hill.
It has been a transition of power marked by violence in which 4 people died after supporters of Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol to stop Congress from certifying President-elect Joe Biden's election victory. The clashes followed over a 2-month-long war of words between Democrats and the Republicans on the election results. Joe Biden blasted what he called the insurrection as Mr. Trump, while telling the mob to go home, continued to make false claims of electoral fraud.
Order was quickly restored and the President-elect Joe Biden took oath as the 46th President of the United States of America.
Robinette Biden Jr. do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute. The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability. Preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Biden's ascension to the presidency of the U.S. with Vice President Kamala Harris, the first woman of color in the White House, heralded a sea change from the policies adopted by Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. One of the key reversals from the Trump-era policy was the U.S. expressing its interest to return to talks with Iran on the revival of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. After 7 rounds of negotiations in Vienna, the talks are proceeding, albeit at a slow pace. The United Nations in December said that additional effort and patience are required for the full restoration of the JCPOA.
Turning eastwards, North Korea fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile, SLBM, in October this year. Reports of the launch came days after the U.S. and South Korean envoys met in Washington to discuss the nuclear standoff with North Korea. However, the year also saw North Korea restoring dormant communication hotlines with South Korea. In Myanmar, the first morning of February saw the Myanmar military seizing power in the country. The civilian head of the government, State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, and several other leaders of the ruling National League for Democracy were placed under arrest in Myanmar early in the morning on February the 1st.
Following days of tension and apprehension, the Myanmar military Tatmadaw seized power from the civilian government headed by Aung San Suu Kyi. The military arrested Aung San Suu Kyi, President Win Myint, and other senior leaders of the ruling party, National League for Democracy. In a broadcast from the military-run TV, the Tatmadaw announced that the country had been put under emergency for 1 year. It appointed Vice President Min Swe as the acting president, and all powers have been transferred to the Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing. The military said that the leaders have been detained for committing fraud in the national elections held on November 8 last year.
The military regime in Myanmar was met with considerable opposition from multiple quarters. In October, the leaders of the Southeast Asian regional grouping ASEAN rebuked the military government of Myanmar for not taking part in the summit meeting of the organization. ASEAN had earlier decided to downgrade the participation of Myanmar to a non-political level, which was rejected by Myanmar as violating the ASEAN Charter. India, as a concerned neighbor who has consistently supported the cause of a democratic Myanmar, voiced its concern over the developments in the country on various occasions. India's Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla paid a visit to the country recently.
The visit comes just days after a Myanmar court sentenced the deposed state councillor of Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, and former President Win Myint to 4 years in jail on charges of inciting violence against the military and breaking the natural disaster laws of the country. India said that it is disturbed at the verdicts.
It remains to be seen if 2022 will see a return of Myanmar to civilian rule under a democratically elected government.
While crisis and friction plagued Myanmar, India enjoyed political and cultural bonhomie with its other eastern neighbor, Bangladesh. Bangladesh celebrated a triumvirate of events that shaped the nation this year: the Golden Jubilee of the independence of Bangladesh, the birth centenary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and 50 years of the establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Bangladesh. The year saw bilateral visits at the highest level between the two nations. In March, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Bangladesh and met his counterpart, Sheikh Hasina. In December, President Ramnath Kovind took part in the 50th Independence Day celebrations in the country.
আমি গণ প্রজাতন্ত্রী বাংলাদেশের জনগণকে আন্তরিক অভিনন্দন ও শুভেচ্ছা জানাই। On this historic 50th anniversary of the liberation of Bangladesh, I bring you festive greetings from your 1.3 billion brothers and sisters in India.
Developments in India's western border left the entire world shaken. The year 2021 was epoch-making in terms of the events that unfolded in Afghanistan and its wider implications on the country and the region. After a nearly 2-decade-long war, the United States, under its new president, Joe Biden, announced a definite deadline to end their war on terror in the country.
We cannot continue the cycle of extending or expanding our military presence in Afghanistan, hoping to create ideal conditions for the withdrawal and expecting a different result. I'm now the 4th United States president to preside over American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th.
The announcement signaled the onset of a marauding Taliban which rapidly overwhelmed the underprepared ANDSF. Large swathes of Afghan territory were coming under control of the Taliban, and on the 15th of August, in a major turn of events, Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani had resigned and fled the country. The Taliban took over the presidential palace. Scenes of jubilation among the Taliban were contrasted with horrific scenes of people trying to flee the war-ravaged nation. Images of Afghans trying to flee the nation saw them clinging on the flights that took off from Kabul airport. Horrific visuals of people falling off from these flights remain one of the most enduring images of the past year.
Meanwhile, countries around the world expressed alarm at the unfolding situation in Afghanistan. India, as a concerned neighbor, raised the issue of an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled peace process and the need to ensure that the hard-won rights of women and the minority communities in Afghanistan were not lost. The United Nations held an emergency meeting to discuss the issue.
The international community must be united. We must speak with one voice to uphold human rights in Afghanistan.
We are extremely concerned about Taliban's not honoring their promises and commitments made in their statements at Doha and other international fora.
As a neighbor of Afghanistan, as a friend of its people, the current situation prevailing in the country is of great concern to us in India.
Recognizing the wide implications of the Afghan problem for the security and peace in the region, India held the Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan in the month of November. The dialogue was attended by the National Security Advisors or Secretaries of the National Security Councils of India, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan.
The Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan has emphasized that Afghanistan's territory should not be used for sheltering, training, planning or financing any terrorist acts. The meeting condemned all terrorist activities in the strongest terms and reaffirmed that their firm commitment to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations.
This is a time for close consultations amongst us, greater cooperation and interaction and coordination among the regional countries.
As the new year approached, the UN Security Council brought together the countries of the world for the cause of extending humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan. The UN Security Council on the 22nd of December unanimously adopted a US resolution that facilitates humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy, in his statement said that access to humanitarian assistance should be without hindrance.
The winter is already upon us. It is important that assistance be scaled up urgently and unhindered access be provided to the UN and other agencies. In this context, India has supported the call of the international community that access to humanitarian assistance for Afghanistan should be direct and without any hindrance.
With the collective gaze of the international community on Afghanistan, 2022 will bear witness to the country as it responds to the appeals to peace, security, justice and progress. In Nepal, the politics saw changes in the leadership on account of the decision of the country's apex court. The 2021 saga started in December 2020 with President Bidya Devi Bhandari accepting the recommendation of Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli to dissolve the House of Representatives, even though much of its 5-year term remained and Mr. Oli commanded a majority. Several instances of back and forth between the executive and the apex court eventually saw Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba of the Nepali Congress securing a vote of confidence. He is currently in power and will lead Nepal to its next general elections in 2022.
To the north of Nepal, India's relations with China faced significant strain in the year 2021. The friction caused by the incursion of China into the Indian side of the line of actual control in 2020 spilled over to this year as well.
The events in eastern Ladakh last year have so profoundly disturbed the relationship because they not only signaled a disregard for commitments about minimizing troop levels, but also showed a willingness to breach peace and tranquility.
The people-to-people relations between India and China also suffered due to the restrictions over movement placed by either country. However, certain prickly issues such as that of the stranded Indian sailors were resolved through diplomatic means.
Around mid-December last year, China officially announced a ban on Australian coal imports as tensions between the two countries intensified. The seafarers caught in the middle of a geopolitical feud between China and Australia faced great mental and physical sufferings.
On the 1st of July 2021, China commemorated the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's founding. In his speech, Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed to crush any supporters of Taiwan independence. With China's increasing belligerence on its territorial and maritime border, countries around the world coalesced around a shared vision for the Indo-Pacific. The vision called for a free and open Indo-Pacific. The like-minded democracies of India, USA, Australia and Japan, or the Quad nations, came together to promote their common vision of the Indo-Pacific. The first ever in-person Quad Leaders Summit was held in September this year.
Prime Minister Modi has described the Quad as a force for global good. In a joint statement issued after the summit, the Quad leaders called for a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is also inclusive and resilient. They said the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea must be adhered to in the South China Sea.
2022 will see the vision of Quad leaders for a peaceful, prosperous and stable Indo-Pacific being further mainstreamed in the global arena. Quad countries will also begin vaccine delivery in early 2022 to countries in the Indo-Pacific region.
India assumed the presidency of the UN Security Council during the eventful month of August. Under his presidency, the Security Council took up several pressing matters at the global high table, including Afghanistan, the Israel-Palestine conflict, Yemen, Myanmar, and the UN peacekeeping forces. Global financial watchdog Financial Action Task Force FATF retained Pakistan on its grey list. This decision was announced at the conclusion of the FATF's three-day plenary to discuss key issues in the fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. At the UN Security Council, India issued a stinging reply to Pakistan's baseless allegations against India with respect to Kashmir.
Member states are aware that Pakistan has an established history and policy of harboring, aiding and actively supporting terrorists. This is a country which has been globally recognized as one openly supporting, training, financing and arming terrorists as a matter of state policy. It holds the ignoble record of hosting the largest number of terrorists proscribed by the UN Security Council.
The United Nations was also seized of the ongoing turmoil and resultant humanitarian crisis in the African nation of Ethiopia for the better part of the year. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was sworn in for a second 5-year term running a country in the grip of a nearly year-long war. Mr. Abiy, the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize winner for restoring ties with neighboring Eritrea and for pursuing sweeping political reforms, faced major challenges as the war in the Tigray region spreads into other parts of the country. The United Nations, United States and several European nations expressed concern after Ethiopia expelled 7 UN officials that it accused of supporting Tigray forces who are battling the Ethiopian and allied forces.
The military confrontation, which started some 10 months ago in the northern region of Tigray, is spreading, and the level of human suffering is growing, with serious political, economic and humanitarian implications for Ethiopia and the broader region. All parties must recognize a simple truth. There is no military solution.
On Christmas Eve, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged warring sides to seize the opportunity to bring an end to more than a year of fighting in the Tigray region. Mr. Guterres welcomed the Ethiopian government's announcement that the National Defense Force will pause at its current positions.
The intractable problem of ensuring peace and stability in West Asia continued to raise an ugly spectre in 2021. In May, the 11-day Israel-Hamas conflict caused widespread destruction in the Gaza Strip.
The deadly exchange of fire between Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip and the Israeli military has escalated significantly. According to media reports, Israel carried out hundreds of air strikes in Gaza and Palestinian militants fired multiple rocket barrages at Tel Aviv and the southern city of Beersheba.
The spread of the Omicron variant of the COVID-19 towards the end of the year has called into question the rampant vaccine inequity prevalent in the world. The WHO has decried the extremely low rates of vaccination in much of the developing world as Omicron casts a shadow on the global recovery from the pandemic.
There is now consistent evidence that Omicron is spreading significantly faster than the Delta variant. There can be no doubt that increased social mixing over the holiday period in many countries will lead to increased cases, overwhelmed health systems, and more deaths.
Prime Minister Modi has urged the people of India to exercise caution in light of the new variant but not panic. He announced that starting the 3rd of January, children will be eligible to receive the approved vaccines in India, a practice that many of the Western nations have started already.
साथियों, 15 साल से 18 साल की आयु के बीच के जो बच्चे हैं, अब उनके लिए देश में वैक्सीनेशन प्रारंभ होगा। 2022 में 3 जनवरी को सोमवार के दिन से इसकी शुरुआत की जाएगी। ये फैसला कोरोना के खिलाफ देश की लड़ाई को तो मजबूत करेगा ही, स्कूल कॉलेजों में जा रहे हमारे बच्चों की और उनके माता-पिता की चिंता भी कम करेगा।
2021 was not all about conflict and strife. Human ingenuity and perseverance was matched by machines bearing the names of the same qualities as the Perseverance rover carried the Ingenuity helicopter, which took a historic flight on the Red Planet. The moment was described by one of the NASA team members as a Wright brothers moment on Mars.
So Ingenuity was called the Wright brothers moment because it was the first controlled flight ever on another planet. And it's a total feat of engineering. It's a resounding success by any measure.
Humanity's quest to unravel the mysteries of space advanced further as the Parker Solar Probe touched the surface of the sun's corona. As the year drew to a close, as a Christmas present, NASA announced the launch of the James Webb Telescope, which will replace the Hubble Space Telescope to give humans a window into the past.
Séparation Webb Space Telescope. Go Webb!
We do have confirmation of observatory separation. The James Webb Space Telescope, amidst applause here in the Mission Control Center, now taking its first steps in pursuit of cosmological discovery.
Coming back to the Earth, world leaders congregated to discuss humanity's biggest problem, climate change, at the COP26 summit in Glasgow in November.
In my lifetime, I witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellencies, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here.
India negotiated an agreement underpinned by the principles of climate justice, equity, and aligned with India's developmental trajectory and priorities.
One word, एक शब्द, क्लाइमेट के संदर्भ में वन वर्ल्ड एक विश्व का मूल आधार बन सकता है, अधिष्ठान बन सकता है। ये एक शब्द है लाइफ, LIFE, यानी लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरमेंट।
2021 was also very eventful, with a multitude of sporting and cultural events taking place around the world. After a long period of uncertainty, the Tokyo Olympics eventually did take place and thrilled sports enthusiasts from around the world. India scripted history at the Olympics with its best ever performance with 7 medals. Neeraj Chopra, India's golden boy, won the first ever gold medal for India in a track and field event.
Neeraj Chopra!
I think this is a defining moment for Indian sport. For the first time ever, a medal in gold for India coming from track and field. For Neeraj to come on the big stage, his first Olympics, shatter the field and win a gold is very, very special. This is inspirational, and I don't mean it as a cliche.
In more sporting zeniths being scaled, Lionel Messi won the Ballon d'Or for a record 7th time, beating Polish superstar Robert Lewandowski. On the racetrack, a young and fearless Max Verstappen beat Lewis Hamilton to the podium at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix to win the tournament. The British superstar Lewis Hamilton received knighthood for the purely dominant force that he has been on the F1 track for years.
The championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world. Oh my Lord!
The year 2021 proved that the spirit of collaboration and collective effort offers a way out of the most pressing problems that the world faces today. As the first rays of light reach the eastern shores and usher in the new year, it brings with it a hope and a promise of a better world.